first of all, we want to say a huge welcome to everyone. My name is Vandana Saxena-Poria.
And my name is Aman Zaidi.
And we want to just give you a brief background. I have this habit of poking people, right? And what came out, like poking people, like asking them questions and saying, well, what do you really mean? What do you really mean? And what came out in a lot of conversations, and I'm talking about thousands and thousands of conversations over the last years, is that people were individually unhappy following societal norms. But they still followed those norms, right? Because they kind of felt like they didn't have any other option. And because of my poking, one of my good friends, Rhythm Banerjee, started calling me the porcupine, hence my little porcupine, whoops, up this side. Okay, Aman, over to you.
Yeah, and thanks to you, Vandana. The name Falcon actually came from you. One of the things that I've always liked to do is to help people see the whole picture. What I've noticed is people often have only one part of the puzzle. They kind of focus on that, and I've always liked to show them the alternate or the complete picture, a bird's eye view, so to speak. And that's what got you to start calling me the Falcon. And
yeah, absolutely. And basically, we decided to come together to poke at issues that might not be being spoken about enough, in order to do what the Falcon does, which is look really closely and find out what's missing. And we're hoping that together with you, we might be able to kind of change things and start with ourselves, but start changing the communities around us. So Aman, over to you to talk about a few of the next topics.
Yeah, like you said, Vanna, I think what we're trying to do here is take the issues that affect us and start poking at them, start questioning them, so that our perspective on them widens. Some of the topics we want to talk about are around organization culture, for example. Is our org culture producing a conveyor belt of corporate zombies? Are we leading or impeding when we practice leadership? Is overcoming our weaknesses overrated? So topics like that. Now back to you. What are we going to talk about today, Vandana?
So today we really want to look at where did we get these definitions of success from, right? So where have they come about? And more importantly, they may have been right for a certain time, but what's the impact it's having of us, of having those definitions of success? And then really moving over, the third part is, how do we change this conversation? Can we come up with alternative definitions? And the fourth part is, we really want to hear from you. So please use the chat box. Please do ask us questions. We'll try and get some people in live. Ask us questions or give us your thoughts. We want to be able to share them with the group. And yeah, take it from there.
Yeah. So you got a Q&A box and you got a chat box. So you want to drop in a question, you want to raise your hand, you want to put in your comments in chat, make it as, it's your show essentially. So, feel free to jump in.
Okay. So, Aman, I want to start with really getting into the topic now and saying, would you call yourself successful?
Well, in whose eyes, Vandana?
Well, I guess, how did you come up with your definition of success?
Well, it actually took a long time, to be honest. Growing up, my family, they never spoke about success or achievement. My maternal grandfather, extremely, he was quite an achiever. Padma Shri, Joint Director, All India News Services, All India Radio News Services, Secretary to the Chief Minister, Jammu and Kashmir. Wow. Despite that, not once was there any focus on achieving or
wow.
talk about success. So growing up, I didn't hear these terms. And I think what happened, yes, go on.
Yeah, no, I just want to ask you, okay, you didn't hear it as success, but all of us have ideals that we want to kind of live up to. So as a kid or as a teenager, then how did you come up with these ideals or whatever it was, if your family wasn't talking about success?
Yes, I think it happened, it started to happen thanks to media and thanks to the world I encountered once I hit college. So I actually did my college in Bombay, and Bombay being the commercial capital of India, most people, even young teenagers like me at that time, they would talk about money and about cars and about achievement, and media kind of reinforces that, right? I mean, I remember when I was for a scrapbook project in school,
Yeah.
I'd chosen two topics. One was tennis and the other was Hollywood. And the Hollywood scrapbook, each picture that I would cut, it was about a certain message, right? The men would dress in a certain way. There were suits, or, Sylvester Stallone was the only guy who wouldn't wear a shirt. But of course, he was muscular.
Yeah.
And all the women were in varying stages of undress, swimsuit or slit or stuff like that. So all that media made me realize, okay, big bungalow, fancy car, dress like that, muscles like that, shape like that, that must be success.
So kind of like what I've put up on the screen now.
Yeah, absolutely. So the messaging that the media and the world gives us is really, this is what you're seeing. Anything that represents success. So you look at the doctor standing in front, the Nerolac ad. Your house needs to be, your house is never a 1 bedroom or a 2 bedroom. Nobody advertises that. It's always a 2-story, balcony, this huge lawn in front of the guy in front is a doctor, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and also I think the thing that I struggled with growing up was that the women were always perfect in the adverts. I mean, the thing, look at the Times of India ad with the home of convenience in Godrej, right?
Yeah.
Do you ever see people looking like that going to the gym? But you know what? If you get a Godrej residence, that's what you're going to suddenly transform into, and that's success, right?
Yeah. You're right. You're right. I hear you. And unfortunately, these are the messages. These are the home stereotypes, or these are the body stereotypes that everyone seems to be bombarded with. And you know what? When we look at that, especially children, but also adults, you look at that, and it's very subtle messaging that unless you're exercising, unless you're slim, unless you're fair, unless you dress in a certain way, you're not successful.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right, because I know growing up in the UK, especially in the 70s and the 80s, we never saw Asians, right, in any newspapers or in any adverts, and and so therefore I just assumed I was ugly. That was it. I was the ugliest that could ever be, and I would like literally walk around like this because I was so ugly, and that really came from these images. The other thing that these images, I look at the insurance adverts, and it's always the perfect family. It's the husband, the wife, and the older boy and the younger girl, and they're all fair skinned and they all look beautiful, and that's success, right? That's what we aspire to be. Um, okay, if I poke you a bit more, then what do you think? What is it basically saying to us? This idea of success that we're seeing up here.
Well, the way I see it, Vandana, I think when we are young and our worldview is still being formed at that time, I guess you can be given for blindly accepting whatever's thrown at you. But I'm assuming that at some point you develop your own understanding of the world, and your idea, our idea of our self-worth, our idea of our success. Do we want it held ransom by the external world? The external world is always going to talk about studying and exams and scoring and clearing and big colleges and salary and then stuff like that. And are we going to allow our idea of success and self-worth to be ransomed by all of this stuff?
So basically, we're saying that our validation of success is based on what other thinks from the world outside, and often not from an internal space.
Yeah, I think that is the problem, even for very, very liberated people. I think even I can speak for myself. I'm 45 and I do think differently, but I find even today sometimes it's a struggle because that idea of external validation is so deep rooted that it can sometimes knock you off balance, and it takes you a couple of days to just get back to, oh wait, this is not what I wanted.
Yeah, and also, when the media also lauds people who have made billions, they're the ones who are in the papers. Those are the ones or the gorgeous ones who are on page 3 and everything. It subconsciously kind of seeps into our veins. We
Absolutely.
actually, you know,
Sorry, I'm
we,
going to jump in
yeah,
here if I
yeah,
may,
go,
right?
go on.
I think that's the success con. The fact is that all around us, people seem to be worshipping, the extraordinary, and the extraordinary is important. Sure, the first guy that made 1 billion, it was remarkable.
Mm.
And maybe that's why you wanted to talk about it. But the point is, how long are you going to talk about only that? So, the media and everybody, and therefore everybody that consumes the media seems to get obsessed with this whole, oh, billionaire. Oh, billionaire 3 times over. Oh,
Yeah, yeah,
17,
yeah. Or
17
fifth
yachts, 18 cars.
startup.
Come off it.
Yeah, yeah.
There's more.
But okay, let's get back to our audience, right? Now we've got a really interesting audience here because we know about 60% of you, and we're almost tribal in lots of ways because we don't subscribe to a lot of these definitions. But what Aman and I did was we went out onto Twitter and LinkedIn and we did some polls on what success is according to, a broader audience. And what was really interesting was, having holidays abroad and owning your own house was 20% of people said that was what success was to them. Having the perfect family, having everyone doing everything, in the right way was 50% of people on Twitter. What did you get on LinkedIn, Aman?
Well, LinkedIn very interesting as well. We had people saying that money. About 30% people said that financial well-being or financial wealth was important. 30% was that. You had another 30+% talking about free time, and that was interesting. So our like you said, our audience is fairly mature. They understand that. I think only 2% said that things such as holidays abroad represent success to them. And then there
Yeah.
was another 34% that had a variety of different things that they put in comments, and that was beautiful to read.
Yeah, and I'd be interested. I don't know if Glenda or Yamini, you can stick up a poll at the moment. What we want to know from you is, where does your definition of success come from? Or where did, it's not, look, we think you're quite an erudite audience, but where did it come from? Your first definitions of success, where did they come from? Is it from the family, from community? And majority, I guess we're saying, I'm sure all of you will say that it's some, partly from family, partly from community and friends and stuff. But I guess we're saying, what was your overriding one? Or the other alternative is put it in the chat box. We'd really like to see your thoughts on this. So we're just going to give you a few minutes or a few seconds to put that in. But in the meantime, I want to talk to you about a really interesting concept. Where and how did these social norms come from? Why do the newspapers still show us these images of what success is? And there's a really interesting professor called Damon Centola, who's at UPenn, and he's done studies on how social norms came about, right? And he says there's certain people who really believe that this is true, right? So, Aman, for example, they are what's known as true believers and true enforcers. So they not only believe it, but they will enforce that view on other people. But what's really interesting is 80% of people are generally either false believers or false enforcers, but they go along with it, right? So a false believer is somebody who doesn't really believe in it individually, but does it because other people are doing it. And a false enforcer is, again, somebody who doesn't believe in it, but does it and encourages other people to do it. And this is what's happened in our world. We have become a nation or a globe of false enforcers. And this is really impacting us. I mean, what do you think? Do you agree with what Damon says, or do you disagree?
I think Damon has hit it on the head. See, time and again, if you look at the history of social injustice in the world, if you look at what happened in Nazi Germany or what's happening today in America or in India, I don't believe that all of Germany was Nazi, that there were Jew haters. But the thing is, no, there was only a bunch of true believers in the, Aryan supremacy or the white supremacy or black haters or, all those kinds of people. The majority doesn't believe it. The problem is that the majority tends to become, false enforcers. They go along with it. And, if you want social change, if you want anything to vary in our world, it is these, it's these false enforcers or true enforcers who don't really believe in it to stop doing this, to wake up and speak up about it.
And I guess that is what we're talking about. The thing is, as we said, we know that you're a pretty erudite audience. But, you know, the question is, how many of us actually speak up about this? And not just speak up to one or two people, but speak up in a massive context. And speak up, for example, and talk about their failures, right? Because that's one thing that I've seen. And I think this is a big challenge. People don't like to talk about failures because we consider them lepers. I mean, more or less. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah. And, if I may just, I'll come back to that in a moment, the failure bit that you spoke about. But as we saw the poll just now, again, I think it was very significant. A large chunk of the responses were that, look, our ideas of success seem to be shaped by our community and our family. So the people that live around us, what they value seems to affect us. And I believe, and I know you want to talk about this later on today, Vandana, I believe the vice versa is also possible. If society can influence us by what they say, I think it's possible for us to influence our community, our friends, and our family based on what we say to them.
Yeah, that's true. That's very true. I noticed this, just as a complete aside. In the UK, football, right, was always the male sport. And whenever women played football, it was called women's football, right? And so it was always kind of like women's football. But in the last World Cup, female World Cup, they did not call it Women's World Cup. They called it the World Cup. And so as a result, everyone was just talking about the World Cup, and they forgot that word Women's World Cup. And so it became a norm. So how do we change norms? We change norms, first of all, by acknowledging, oh my God, we're not talking about this. And the second thing is about speaking up.
Absolutely. So, going back to that question that you asked, I think, yes, you're right. The thing is, we tend to, for whatever reason, from a sense of shame or vulnerability, we tend not to talk about our failures. And that reticence to be authentic, it's like a CV. Everything is like a CV. You look at our LinkedIn profiles. Vandana, you and I both know, we talk, and I know.
Where are my failures? I'm going to go and add my failures today, Aman. Seriously.
Absolutely.
I'm going to do that.
Yeah, look at our LinkedIn profiles or look at our CVs. We don't mention, and all of us have stumbled and failed, and some of us have got the sack, and we don't talk about that. And you know why? Because we're afraid that the rest of the world does. And as a result of that, because we don't, because of this inauthentic version of ourselves that we put out there, those people who see us, they only believe that, oh, this person is mega successful. The only reason we know that Amitabh Bachchan also failed is because he owed 220 crores to the bank. If that hadn't been in the papers, we would have continued to believe that this guy's life is free of struggle and he's a demigod. And that's not true. Thankfully, the papers covered the fact that he was in debt. Sachin Tendulkar, so many centuries to his name, but the fact is, we all know that he's got probably the highest number of ducks to his name as well. So if we look closely enough, if we stop focusing only on achievements, and if you also mind for, the failures, that's when a complete picture of a human being emerges. Our world and everybody in it is not only successful.
Yeah, but people don't like talking about failure. Why don't you talk? Why has your LinkedIn profile not got anything about failures?
That's a very good question. I guess I have subscribed to this trap.
We all have. I don't think any of us have. I mean, but actually, having said that, I think both you and I have done talks. I did a talk 2 weeks ago at Flame University, which was called From Failures to Freedom.
Sure, you're right. Both of us have spoken very publicly about the importance of failure and our own failures, and we are always game to actually talk about them. And I think maybe the next challenge we want to throw to ourselves is, can we list some of our glorious failures on LinkedIn as well?
There was one I remember that I spoke about with you that really impacted you.
That is true. So, everyone, this is a wonderful story, and I'm actually going to allow Vandana to finish it, but I'll start. I was actually talking to Vandana, and I said, you know what? I've made some tremendous goof ups financially in my career. I've made some terrible money decisions. And she cut me off midstream, and then she told, so I'm going to let her cut me off.
I just said, look, I'm a chartered accountant, right? And I am not just terrible with money, but I've made some really bad business decisions as well. And I have ended up getting into legal disputes, right? And I remember once, a couple of years ago, three years ago, I was in the middle of this horrific thing, and I knew it was my fault that and I was just feeling so stupid that I had made this mistake with these people. And I went to see one of my mentors, who's Alec Badamsi. And those of you in India will know Alec. He passed away a couple of years back. But Alec was like the god of advertising in India. And he and I were working on a book at that time. And I walked in and I was really upset. And he said to me, Vandana, what's wrong? And I said, Alec, I'm so embarrassed to tell you this, but I just made this really stupid mistake. And I've lost this amount of money. And I'm a chartered accountant. And he goes, darling, don't worry about it. I lost X lakh with so-and-so down the drain. Someone like me making a stupid decision. She goes, he said, darling, everyone does it, but nobody talks about it. And that's what I shared with you. Other struggles. I mean, having gone through a divorce, right? Once during the dot-com crisis, almost going bankrupt, right? These are things that I do talk about, and it's really interesting that we tend not to talk about anything that is vulnerable, because we're trained to be a success robot, and we are trained to show everyone what a success we are.
This is why we want to call it the success con, because it's not the whole truth. It's a con. When your father tells you, you should study, right? You should get great marks. The truth is your father did not study. In 95%.
You're talking about you and Alicia here.
Sure, yes, I am actually talking about myself, but I'm also talking about my parents.
Yeah.
Because my parents weren't academically brilliant. My mom was a hardworking student, but she had her own struggles. She'd speak Hindi she flunked Hindi till class 8, until she actually had to sit down and teach herself. So, we all have our struggles, and that's the success con. People are always going to tell you, work harder, be successful, when people themselves are lazy and, they flunked as well. And so this inauthenticity is the success con.
But here's a really interesting thing. Sorry to cut you off. Sunena has just said, I do talk about my failures. However, sometimes people call it glorifying victim mentality. And that's the other bloody con of this whole success con, isn't it?
So to Sunena, here's my humble submission. I think, again, the trap is, our sense of self-worth and our judgment of what we are doing needs to come from ourselves, and it doesn't need to hinge on other people's opinions. And, I'll tell you what happened. 10 years ago, I decided to leave my job. I was head of operations. I had a, fat pay packet, fat for that time. And I actually quit. And my MBA batchmate, one of my good buddies, he actually said terrible things to me. He said, Aman, you're a failure. You're scared. You're running away from the corporate world. You're not tough enough. Look at your mom. She was a single parent. She brought kids up. She worked throughout her life. You're not half as tough as her. All because I'd chosen to walk away from the corporate world. And what happened? 5 years later, he's saying, good you got out, man. I'm suffering here.
This is, you bring up a really good point. I remember when I moved out to Eastern Europe back in the mid-90s, all the uncles and aunties in the UK were all saying, Saxena Saab, Usha ji, what's going to happen to your daughter? Everyone that we know goes to Singapore or to New York, and she's going to Bucharest in Romania. No, and they made my parents feel like rubbish, right? But 10 years later, those same parents were saying to their children, Beta, look at Vandana, what a success. She's a trailblazer. Isn't it interesting how things change, how people's opinion of success changes?
Absolutely. And that's why it's all the more important for us to recognize, and I think we're beginning to recognize that our ideas of success and therefore our ideas of self-esteem are currently based on the external world. And
Yeah.
now that we are recognizing it, we want to disassociate from that. We don't want to give people too much power over your own life.
So I want to poke you a bit here, Aman, and say, what do you think the impact of the Success Con is, the way we've talked about it? We're going to get into some of the chat that's been going on in a minute, but what do you think? What is the impact? What has the impact perhaps been on you, on people that you know of this idea of success? You kind of talked about it a little bit with your colleague, but what
Yeah.
more would you say?
Well, it's terrible. To be honest, all of us know about it. You know that the number of suicides among students,
Yeah.
among young people, among people who are in the Bollywood or fashion world is actually increasing. There are cases of depression. Now, why? Because there's such an external burden of expectations on these people. You got to look good. You got to make money. You got to be successful. You got to crack this entrance. And there are so many people who are succumbing to this pressure, and it's rubbish. And even those people who are not succumbing to this pressure, so you look at the corporate world outside, everybody's wonderful embellished CVs. They don't talk about what people are going through. People are going through anxiety, stress, burnout, heart disease, high blood pressure. All of these things are happening to people, and again, they don't talk about it, but they should. I'll talk about it openly. All this external pressure that there was a time that I was beginning to subscribe to, it has actually led to high grade anxiety for me. I have actually struggled with, I've gone to near burnout, and I actually had to claw my way back from burnout, and that's when the wake up call happened. So I woke up and I'm speaking up, and I'm going to urge all of us to please speak up.
Yeah, no, I think you're fair. What you're saying is fair enough. I think the other side of that is, and this is what I've seen in the corporate world, and I'm sure you have too, is that when people at the top start burning out, they start getting really ratty with the people below them, right?
Yeah.
And they expect them to work harder. I mean, I will say, I think they exploit them, right? They exploit people below them because of the pressure, or they're nasty to them, or whatever, because they're feeling the pressure, and it's kind of like their way of taking it out on others.
And the reason people allow themselves to be exploited is because they believe that their promotion, their money, and everything actually depends on this, again, external validation.
Yeah.
Nobody's been taught to value themselves for what they are. From childhood, everybody said, look, you're only good enough if you subscribe to what I think is, and that's why professionals who are being exploited refuse to do anything about it.
And I know that, when I looked at our audience that we've got, there's a good, sort of like 40% of them who are working by themselves, who've set up their own organizations and are running things, in the way that they want to be doing it. But having said that, I also speak to a lot of that 40%, and they're all unhappy with something. It might be that they don't have enough clients, they don't, they're finding it difficult to break in with the brands or whatever. So again, the problem is we get swept up in this idea of what success is. But let's change the conversation slightly to say, Aman, what do you say? Where does your definition of success come from now?
Well, for like a lot of our participants, I think my definition of success also is having more free time. I think having free time is a great indicator of success to me.
Okay, but I want to poke you a bit here. What do you do with that free time? Because it's not about having free time, it's what you do with that free time.
Oh, yes.
That
Yes,
is really
fantastic.
what you think is
Fantastic
success.
question. Yes. Having that free time means choosing it to spend on the things that are valuable to me. So spending time, let's say, with my daughter, or just reading on Wikipedia for 3 hours about archaeology and anthropology, about what is the latest dig. So recently, I must have spent maybe 3 or 4 hours reading about dinosaurs and how they became extinct and stuff like that. Having the freedom to chase my interests down.
Yeah, but that's time that you could have spent writing a video or putting up a video on YouTube about how you can get more business.
Sure, and a lot of my friends will tell me that you should be spending time on self branding. You should have YouTube video channel. Look, I understand it's important, but it's important to you. And I don't want all my life to be about, about YouTube and branding and personal branding, because then, then I'm a slave again to this whole success con. There's more to life, right? I mean, I want to know about dinosaurs.
Yeah, exactly. And so for you, it is about having time to explore your own interests, which are not related necessarily to making money. It's just stuff that satisfies your curiosity, etc., etc. But then okay. And what you're saying is you don't care what other people say about where you are in life and what you're doing, and that you could achieve more and all of this. You don't care.
No, I don't care. And, I don't care. And I want to encourage everybody else not to care about what other people's opinion is about what model of car I drive and, what kind of clothes I wear. I've never worn a wristwatch. I know there are people who've told me, why don't you wear a wristwatch? Why don't you shave? Why don't you
have a Rado wristwatch?
Yeah, no, I don't. And I'll tell you a very interesting incident, right? I was being nudged saying we should wear a wristwatch. It looks very professional, So I actually bought myself. Today you get really cheap imitation knockoffs, right? So I got two for the price of one, good looking, really cheap knockoffs. And I was actually wearing one in office on one day and another one in office on another day. And people say, you got two watches? And I said, yes, and each of them costs only $150. And you know what? And there was this lady, very senior lady. She actually looked at me and said, I wish you wouldn't say that. I wish you wouldn't admit to it being $150, but I don't care.
Because very interesting. You don't care, but for them, when they thought it was more expensive, then they saw you in a different way. Yeah. And then you've got a question, yeah, well, let's not get into what other people think. Let's
yeah, but don't get me wrong. Okay, let me just, I know you've asked me this earlier. Look, don't get me wrong. It's not that, it's not that there won't be struggle in my life with these choices that I'm making. All of us who have chosen to become solopreneurs, coaches, trainers, starting our own business, walking away from the, the corporate world actually gives you a lot of security. And all of us who choose to walk away from that, it's not that we don't have struggles. We have to do our own branding, own marketing, own sales, own invoicing, everything we're doing ourselves. It's hard work, but it's not that when you're in there, you're not working hard. You're going to work hard anyway. Might as well work hard being happy. Is my mantra, right? I mean, I don't want to work hard and also be unhappy, right?
Yeah, fair point.
Yeah.
All right. Well.
Yeah. So let me get back to you. Sorry, I know I'm letting you sneak away without sharing your own definition of success. So what about your own?
So, I think when I was in my late teens and my 20s, I was chasing that the definition of success that all those pictures showed, having the great job and having the nice house and all of that. And I think when I got into my 30s, I really started to kind of look around and look at how happy people were. And I saw people who were deemed really successful to be really, really unhappy when I kind of spoke to them about their lives. And so as a result, I went on this deep, very introspective journey to try and work out what success was to me. And through it, I started writing and I started exploring different worlds that had different meanings of success. So what would the world look like if it was run by women? What if it was run by children? What if it was run by people who could hear what you thought, but not what you said? And, through this process, I've written a very crazy set of science fiction novels, which will be coming out soon, called The Ojas Chronicles. But through the discovery of that character, the main character there, Ojas, how she discovers who she is, what's encoded inside of her, I kind of discovered what was encoded inside of me. And what I realized was what I yearned for was belonging. What I yearned for was contributing to people to help them reach their definition of their own potential, not the world's definition, right? So it was belonging, trust, and contribution that was really driving me. And so everything that I do is all the webinars that I do, all the work that I do is all around belonging, trust, and contribution.
Nice. So if I was to ask you this, let me put it this way. If I was to say, Vandana, that you're saying that your idea of success is being more fulfilled and, leading life on your terms.
Mm.
Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, it's being more fulfilled. Leading life on my terms with what I feel intrinsically is important to me, which is to create belonging, to create trust, and to create contribution. So
And
contribute to people.
you don't, what do you have to say to those people saying, hey, you spent the last few years writing books, you could have started your third company and sold it by now?
Yeah, and what I'd say to them is, every now and again it pinches me and it makes me, I go back into the old con of success. But now I immediately center myself and say, what do I want to do? What really makes me happy and fulfilled? And it's this. It's this. And even more so when I go and work in corporates where I see people who are actually miserable. And I'm not saying all of them are miserable, but a lot of them have got pressures that they don't want to have. And for me, that kind of leads on to the main bit, which is what can we do to change this status quo, right? And I want to introduce just a really simple concept, right? If you look at really dry, barren ground where nothing is growing, right? The adding of one ingredient is going to make a huge difference, and suddenly everything's going to bloom. And that's the adding of water, right? If you have water on barren ground, the chances are things are going to be able to grow. I think the equivalent of water for human beings is conversation, right? So the one thing that we can do to change the status quo on a large scale, I'm not talking about ones and twos, I'm talking about hundreds, thousands, lakhs, crores, is to start having conversations with others, to be the falcon and to be the porcupine with others, and go into communities, go into people people that you don't know so well, and just talk to them about what their definition of success is. You all have done, clearly from the comments that are coming up, you've all done a lot of work and thought on this, right? I can tell you that just a couple of hours ago, I was talking to 1,000 students in Australia on something, and they've already on LinkedIn, they've been writing up a lot of the things that we talked about. And that is that they haven't really thought about what an independent definition of success. So that's the first thing that I think people can do. I mean, if people could have conversations, first of all, with themselves, with family, and then with their sphere of influence, I think that would make a difference. What else do you think would make a difference? What's been missing in your life and helps you feel that balance when it comes to the word success?
Well, I think you're right, that conversations are like water. To me personally, it's like water and oxygen. It is a life-giving force. It has the ability, like you said, to shape our world, but not only in small groups, like you said. We don't only want to be talking to ourselves and clarifying our own definition and then talking
Yes.
to our friends about it.
Yeah.
If you want to have impact on your world, then you have to have more conversations, and I think therefore a tribe is important. We spoke about earlier. The poll showed us how our family and community influenced us, and now it's our turn to influence them, because it's possible. Now, as a tribe, if all these 48 people plus the four of us, the 52 people are, who are wanting to change the conversation, if all of us collectively have conversations about the success con and about an alternate definition and about all the other important issues, then that voice grows louder, it goes further. And when that voice travels far and wide and loud is when change can begin to happen. So I think this tribe working together is an important one.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, I'm really keen to open it up to people now, and get some comments from people. We've had some fabulous comments in the Zoom webinar chat box. So just looking at a few of those, we've had success during school days was very much, Varsha saying, was very much family, and post that it was media because we got more exposure to the internet. Ulas talks about in early days the influence was from parents, then it moved to friends and community, media, and then it goes to self-introspection. The question is, do we have to wait that long with our kids? Are we having those conversations that, your grades aren't everything? It's okay to fail. How often are we encouraging our kids to fail? That's another thing. I mean, what's struck you from the comments in the box? And please do put up your hands if you'd like to speak. We can get you to come on and converse with us as well.
Yeah, and just in case, if you have the ability to raise your hand on this platform, please do. In case you can't, just please type in your question in either the Q&A or the comments section, and we'd really like to hear your questions and ask, and maybe answer those.
Yeah, any other of the comments in the chat box that really strike you, Aman?
Well, I think there's some agreement I'm seeing. I saw agreement from, Syed Karhani, and I'm hearing agreement from, Vikram Bapat. I think very interesting thing from Syed Karhani. It says it's good to be a freak sometimes.
Yeah.
And there's this guy called David Randall who wrote a book called Freak Factor about his uniqueness and how he embraced it and how that led to success.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because I used to have, so when I was at school, I was completely a misfit, right? I did not fit into any group. So therefore, I believed that there was something wrong with me. And, I'm only talking about 4 years ago. Zara must have been about 10 or 11 at the time, and Jay was about 12. And I'd spent a lot of time thinking about it. And I finally accepted that I was a misfit and I would always be a misfit. And I remember saying to Zara at the dining table, I realize I'm a misfit and it's taken me a long time to get used to this, but it's okay. And you just have to accept that your mother is a misfit. And she looked at me and she's chewing her food and she goes, Mommy, she goes, I'm a misfit. And I just looked at her and I said, what? And she goes, no, I'm a misfit at school. But the difference is your generation thought misfits were failures. My generation thinks misfits are successes, and they all love misfits. So the more of a misfit I am, people seem to like it. I don't care what they think, but that's me. And so I think we need to open up these conversations. I think our kids teach us more than we sometimes know.
It's funny you remind me of this. My daughter keeps saying, Dad, I'm weird, learn to live with it. And I keep, so maybe I should learn something from you and Zara and then say, okay, fine, it's good to be weird. Because I keep telling her, no, you're not weird, you're lovely. And I think, I'm going to take a lesson out of this. So, and I'm going to, funnily, what you're talking about also has roots in psychology. I know that one of the things that my therapist told me was, here's another admission, Sunaina, for you,
And me. Yes.
Therapists,
Therapists, brilliant.
Wonderful people, therapists.
Absolutely.
Lovely people.
Thank you.
She told me something really interesting about self-acceptance. She said, self-acceptance is owning every part of you.
Yeah.
Owning your dark skin color, your paunch, your baldness, your white hair, your procrastination, and not judging it, accepting who you are. And, again, who said we have to be perfect, right? We learned that from Zara and you.
Yeah, yeah. But, just that owning everything. Going back to when I was a kid and I thought I was very ugly. There's a part 2 to that, and that is that I went and lived in Eastern Europe, where all the women are stunningly beautiful, all of them. I mean, 99% of them are tall and size 0 or 2 or 3, and none of the guys would look. There were a group of us expat women working out there. None of the guys, expat guys or local guys, would ever look at us, right? And so I ended up perpetuating this myth that I'm ugly. And I remember going to see my therapist and she was talking about own it. And I was like, I'm going to own my ugliness. And then I just did this really stupid thing. I was in London at the time and I was walking down Liverpool High Street, Liverpool Station. And I just said, Vandana, you are going to look at every single woman and you're just going to say, are they, the same as you, or maybe you look a little bit better than them, right? And I walked down the road and I literally thought I looked better than 90% of them. And I just realized at that point, I owned it, right? Now, that was my opinion. And that's not saying anything about them. And it's not saying, oh, now I think I'm beautiful. I don't. But it just made me realize that it's a relative term. And that's something that I think has come up with, I can't remember who put that, but somebody said, yeah, this is all relative. But the point is, if that relative makes you feel uneasy with yourself, it's not okay. And if it makes you feel uneasy with yourself and you're not talking to other people, you're enforcing that old stereotype, it's not okay. And that's what we need to talk up against.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, you're right. Again, it's very, very important that we stop and we decide for ourselves. We learn, you learn to accept who you are. You take a good, strong look at yourself and understand. You put your looks, your skills, your achievements, and you develop perspective on that. Not just blindly accept the first thought that is being fed in there. Anyway, so I think some very good comments. One of the things that I saw from Ramesh Sood, who's a friend of mine, he says, I openly, my profile lists my failures. So hats off, Ramesh, and
Yeah, that's amazing. I'm
yeah,
honestly, today, I'm going to put up a failure section on my
yeah,
LinkedIn profile. I'm going to find a way to do it. I think
yeah,
that's brilliant. I also think Jill's made a really good point. She said, she's quoted Amy Pence Brown, and she says, in a society that profits from your self-doubt, liking yourself is a rebellious act. That reminded me of Richard Thaler, who got the Nobel Prize for economics.
yeah,
And the fact, nudge economics, right? We get nudged to do a certain thing. And one of the studies found, I don't know if it was Thaler's own study, but if you have a choice of doing something or not doing something, if the media attacks you from a fear standpoint, you're more likely to do it. So an insurance ad which says security for your family is not going to get as many clicks as one that says what will happen to your family if you die, right? So again, we're kind of all driven, we have been driven by self-doubt. And I guess this is the time to say, own who you are and help other people, all other people own who they are. It is a journey. We didn't get here in a day. You didn't get here where you are in a day. But we need to talk to a bigger group of people about this.
yeah. And we talk about emotional intelligence, we talk about critical thinking. I think if we want to become better thinkers, and that better thinking, if we want it to lead to better outcomes for ourselves, we need to understand our own behavior. The fact is that we are afraid, that we are vulnerable, and that when somebody judges us, we are going to be afraid. And once we recognize that and we are willing to challenge that, that's when you can actually start to move past the fear, the anxiety, the vulnerability, and actually discover what is possible.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. Yeah,
yeah.
sorry, go on.
No, I'm looking at some of the comments, and I'm saying Monica, again, a lovely friend of mine. I really like her. She's so sweet. And thanks for being here, Monica. She says, my confidence in myself grew when I started accepting myself with all the parts of me that society said was not good. Freedom
Yeah,
from
freedom.
judgment. You
Yeah,
free yourself from judgment.
yeah.
And I've also got, I know Sunena talked about how mental health, so she mentioned that Deepika Padukone's talking about her mental health issues, is actually seen by many people as publicity, but, that's really sad. And Sunena, I think Vandan and I will talk about mental health in one of the upcoming
Yeah,
episodes,
absolutely.
and so we'd love your views there as well. And there's some very interesting points coming out from people. There are, hold
I've
on,
got
this
I've got Prajna's comment here, which I think is a really nice one. To me, success is from where I was yesterday to where I am today. We should dare to compare ourselves with ourselves, not with others. So have we moved? It's interesting in my book series. I've created this fictitious institute called Paradigm, and in there the word "in" is really important. IN. So instead of
Mhm.
exploration, we do inspiration. And instead of having competitions, we have in-petitions, right?
Okay.
Because it is all about the self. It is all about getting to know yourself. It's not about experiencing, it's about experiencing, right? So I think that's a great way to look at it. Have you moved on? Take stock of where everyone and everything is, but you've got to decide for yourself.
Yeah, and you're right. It's inspiration is probably the right way to put it. And I think interesting thing, Lena points out, there's this thing called the imposter syndrome.
Oh yes.
You're not being true to yourself and
Yes.
trying to fit into the external world and what they are saying. So
Yeah, and we're scared of owning who we really are. But equally, I think Vikram Bobbitt's got a great point. He says it's equally true that validation from others is a good reassurance for one's own perceptions of success. So it's not all bad, right? And I think that's very true. But this is where you've got to create your tribe, right? If you don't have a tribe that kind of thinks in the same way as you, then it's very difficult to know, who do you talk to. So the more we can build that tribe, I think is absolutely crucial. And
Absolutely, because if you're going to look at, there are times that you will want validation, and if you're going to, get validation from a tribe that is not yours,
yeah,
uh, how's that going to work? You and I, at some point, we are going to need validation, and it would be very nice if we could have validation from a tribe that thinks like us, rather than archaic thinking tribes.
yeah. And I think on that point, right, there is a challenge for me. I guess it's been easier than for most people because I've just moved from country to country to country. I've spent the last 15 years in India, but I didn't allow myself to really bond in a really strong way with any particular community. Partly because I was too worried that their views would get imposed, especially on my children, of what correct is, society is, success is, etc., etc. I think the point that I'm trying to make here is you will outgrow people during your life. That doesn't mean that you stop respecting them, you stop talking to them, but you do need to acknowledge that there will be some people who you will outgrow, and therefore you may need to build a new community. And it's not to say you're going to ignore the old community. You will still keep that old community, maybe, because you love them, you cherish them, etc., etc. But when it comes to getting validation of your views, perhaps it won't come from that old community, it will come from the newer community.
Well said. And I must thank you for kind of waking me up to this reality. The fact that as we grow in our life, we need to start building new communities as well.
And I hope this is going to be a community. I know we're down to our last 5 minutes now, and rather than go through more of the comments, what we'll do, we're happy to share these comments with you. What we'll do is we'll save them before the end, and we'll post them on the Facebook page, which at the moment is under the Human Alarm Clock. And we'll invite you to come and join that Facebook page of the Human Alarm Clock. But and what we really would like you to do is to do a couple of things. If you're up for it, if you are with us, if you're resonating on this idea that we need to wake up and speak up more beyond ourselves, because clearly a lot of you are thinking beyond this, let's start thinking about how. The first thing is, if you're still struggling with your personal definition of success, then Aman and I want to support you. And if you send an email to glenda@vandanasaksenapuria.com, we will get a worksheet out to you, which will help you work that out. And I'm going to put that into the box. Aman, why don't you also talk about some of the other things we'd like people to do?
So, the other thing that it'll be really nice is if you can go and start speaking up and trying to figure out this new definition of success. So go and talk to people. How about going and talking to people within your organization? Let's say choose three people within your organization and choose three people outside. You can pick a shopkeeper, a street, and you go to all of these people and you ask them, what is your definition of success? Right? And you may actually discover that different people have different or same or varied definitions of success. And whatever you discover, why don't you write a post about it on the learnings from these interviews that you're taking with people, and put up a post about it on LinkedIn, Facebook, and tag us. Don't forget to write hashtag wake up speak up when you write these posts, because then we can actually go and see what you're writing and we can look these posts up.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, just generally, if you found this useful, write about it, blog about it, share it with us. We want to share it. It isn't, Aman and I have no other interest apart from just trying to communicate this message that for the next generation, for people who are working, especially coming out of these COVID times, we have an opportunity to alter things. So if you speak up, others are going to find their light to be able to speak up too. And that's really what we want. Jill, it's lovely to hear that you're headed to LinkedIn to post about your failures and add it to your profile. You know, I think that's the kind of thing. And if you've got other ideas of other things, so we're asking you, do email us if you want that free worksheet. I put the email address in the box. But secondly, do go and talk to people, and people outside your tribe, right? You know who that is. It might be your maid. If I said to my maid tomorrow, Ranjana, what's your definition of success? I think she'd just look at me and go, Didi. You know, and then it would come back to money. So it's worth having, and you're not going to solve it in one go, but if you do 3, 4, 5, 6 conversations, you know, and just keep mentioning these things, I think we're going to start to see a difference.
Yeah, I know, and
yes.
there's a song in line from a song in Hindi, you know, from Hindi films. Those of you who understand it, great. Those of you who don't, I'll translate it. The line goes, "Apni awaaz jodo meri awaaz se." You know, join your voice to our voice.
Yeah.
You know, let's build this tribe. Let's talk about what's important. Let's actually start to make a dent in our world.